The 9-9, our favorite imaginary precinct in the not-so-imaginary borough of Brooklyn. Helmed by Captain Raymond Holt until last year's cliffhanger, and staffed by a squad of capable yet wisecracking detectives, Brooklyn Nine-Nine is a precinct full of great people who love their jobs and love each other.
He was once my captain.
So he's kind of like our grand captain.
Because of this, we decided to flip the script this time around. This time, we'll be counting up from most evil to most good, because while there's certainly our fair share of baddies, even some of our villains have good hearts. I'm Brad with Wicked Binge, and this is Brooklyn Nine-Nine, evil to good.
Go back inside!
Are you talking to us or the fart?
Last place was a bit of a tough call, but we're gonna give it to the affable yet monstrous Commissioner Kelly. Commissioner Kelly beat out Raymond Holt for the NYPD police commissioner job and immediately set to work making things miserable for Holt, especially after Holt called Kelly out on his return to stop and frisk.
I will not be the new commissioner.
He initially operates in a bit of a passive-aggressive manner, first by closing half the office space in the 99th precinct to make work life a cramped hell. However, as his story arc continues, he puts on more and more nefarious plans, still with that same saccharine smile on his face. His ultimate dastardly bad guy plan is the implementation of a crime tip reporting app that secretly doubles as an illegal wiretap of civilians, thus giving the NYPD nearly unlimited access to its citizens' private data.
You're never going to get away with this, Kelly.
Oh, I already have.
Now, it is true that this scheme never rises to the point of murder, extortion, or other awful crimes that have shown up on the show, but the fact that it was so brazen, affected so many millions of people, and was engineered by the chief law enforcement officer at NYC makes it much more heinous. Ultimately, he was taken down by a nearly unsuccessful suicide squad of past 9-9 rivals, allowing Kelly to retire to cush civilian life. Crime does pay when you're the top cop, we guess. Shame.
Put your resignation on my desk in the morning.
As second most evil, Jimmy the Butcher Figgis. Figgis is a murderous gangster who spends the majority of his time on the show trying to kill detectives at the 9-9. He puts a hit on Adrian Pimento, the detective who went undercover as one of Figgis's henchmen for 12 years. After faking Pimento's death, the 9-9 gang continued to foil a number of Figgis's criminal enterprises, including taking down a mole he had placed in the FBI.
Headshot.
However, what cements his place on the bad guy list is what he does after the 9-9 takes down his ring. He calls Jake directly and threatens to kill him and Holt.
Now I'm gonna kill you both.
Holt and Jake have to spring into hiding, where Figgis tracks him down to Florida and nearly succeeds in murdering them. For his cold-blooded crimes, lack of remorse, and casually shooting a sheriff, Figgis easily lands in second for most evil. Close behind is Lieutenant Melanie Hawkins. Lieutenant Hawkins heads up an elite NYPD task force and is idolized by Jake Peralta.
I know, she's literally my hero.
After accidentally busting her undercover case, Jake and Rosa end up working closely with Hawkins to help her track back down the thief, Billy Ocampo. However, in the process, Jake and Rosa learn that Hawkins is in cahoots with Ocampo. Not only is she a dirty cop, her entire division is dirty. She's running a crime ring within the NYPD.
I meant to save the file, but I deleted it by accident.
Jake and Rosa attempt to expose her, but Hawkins is one step ahead of them and convincingly pins the entire crime ring on Jake and Rosa, leading to their arrest.
We've been on to you for weeks, but we finally got you.
It's only after Holt makes a deal with the mobster is the 9-9 able to clear Jake and Rosa's names and put away Hawkins for good. Next is Seamus Murphy, yet another Irish crime boss. Murphy appears originally as a bit of a chaotic neutral. He supplies Raymond Holt with some quality intel on Hawkins to exonerate Jake and Rosa. Unfortunately, this intel comes with a price, and Holt is beholden to grant Murphy a favor, which turns out to be turning a blind eye to him stealing $2 million. The 9-9 foils his plan, so Seamus threatens to kill Holt's husband Kevin.
That means you mess with my family, I mess with yours.
He eventually kidnaps Holt, before being foiled by Kevin and thrown away in jail for good. Steering away from the truly evil, and more the insufferably awful, is the Vulture. The Vulture is a rival detective who has a terrible habit of swooping in at the last second on a case in order to receive all the glory.
I'll bet you don't even like nip slips.
He's a persistent nuisance throughout the entire show. What tips him from a nuisance to bad is at the end of the 6th season when he double-crosses Jake's mission to expose Commissioner Kelly. It's this act of sabotage and siding with a criminal that makes him nearly irredeemable.
Your
is cooked.
That's not a saying, it's goose.
After the Vulture, we have ex-wife Eleanor Bane of Charles Boyle. The only good thing about Eleanor is that she's out of Charles' life. Poor Charles. They divorced before the beginning of the show, but that didn't stop her from making his life hell for several more years. Aside from the fact that she made Charles unfairly split the beach house, with him getting it from December to February, she extorts her ex-husband.
She locks the door and takes the handle home with her.
Here's the backstory. Eleanor hits a 90-year-old priest and tries to get Charles to drop the case. How does she do this? By going to the sperm bank to withdraw all of Charles' deposits, knowing that he and his new love Genevieve are trying to conceive a child.
It's my sperm.
By the end of the episode, she does the unthinkable, shooting the hostage. No! Charles, however, becomes the bigger man, vowing to become a father some other way. His triumph over her cruelty shows that she no longer holds sway over him, proving that though she may be evil, she's ineffectual.
And I'm gonna be a dad, and there's nothing you could do to stop me.
Our final evil-ish character, Madeline Wuntch, Raymond Holt's arch-rival.
Don't sweet-talk me, Holt.
I gave it my best shot.
Wuntch isn't an evil lawbreaker like many of the other characters on our list. Instead, she's just a woman who hates Raymond Holt, and as a result, works to make his life miserable. This often means taking out her anger on Holt's subordinates, subjecting them and Holt to her petty tit for tats. Underneath all that anger, surprisingly, is a dedicated police professional. It's revealed that she actually admires Holt and did not sabotage him early in his career as he believed.
She sabotaged my career because I refused to bed her.
On top of that, she teams up with Holt and Peralta to put an end to Commissioner Kelly's illegal tactics, making herself acting commissioner in the process. Never one to leave on a friendly note, she pulls off the final tit for tat by demoting Holt at the end of last season.
But also, I was up to something.
Moving on to a character who should be in a category of his own is Melipnos. Does anyone actually know who this guy is?
He's Melipnos?
He's a mystery man who pops up from time to time, leaving our detectives more confused than the moment before. And his last appearance as the last-minute violinist at Jake and Amy's wedding certainly cements his nature as one talented, if confusing, dude.
Holy crap, Melipnos plays like an angel.
Time for another chaotic neutral character, Detective Adrian Pimento. Pimento places above Melipnos because at least Pimento works to protect the citizens of the 9-9.
Meet Detective Adrian Pimento.
He was an undercover detective for a murderous crime boss for 12 years, and his mental health has suffered as a result. He's unpredictable and untethered, and continuously throws himself into dangerous situations. But, as we find out, these are often for selfless reasons. He puts himself into harm's way to protect his family from Figgis, and even lets his colleagues beat him up in order to make an undercover case more convincing. On the flip side, he's deeply paranoid. He's pulled a gun on Jake and the gang more than once, and feared they were trying to kill him.
Not a problem. I've got an arsenal in my pants.
His paranoia is eventually proven right, as Figgis does put a hit on him. Eventually, police work proves to be too much for Pimento and has to step away.
When I was undercover, Jimmy the Butcher cut off my little toe with garden shears and made me eat it.
While he does some questionable things, most of his instability comes as a price he paid to serve his city as an undercover detective. A pretty admirable thing to do. So we have to give him a bit of a pass and give him a little nudge toward good.
Goodbye, 9-9. And with that, I left.
Our first of the core cast, and a total wild card, Gina. Gina would definitely classify herself as the #1 best person on the show. It would in fact ask why we weren't making a video about Gina's moods. Good to Beyonce.
The world just lost an angel.
This gets to the heart of Gina. Her entire universe revolves exclusively around herself and how awesome she believes she is. And in all fairness, she does pull off some awesome stunts, like delivering a life-size statue of herself to the 9-9 after she quits. But oftentimes her stunts are a nuisance, and her work ethic leaves much to be desired. She can be petty and a bit of a bully, especially to Amy and Charles. Her love-hate continuing hookup affair with Charles is a bit of a negative, not so much because she's sleeping with a co-worker, but more so because she insults Charles and herself about the situation, and then continues to hook up with him. Everything in her life must be dramatic. She's a diva.
Excuse me, I have an announcement to make. Can I have everyone's attention, please?
After Gina, we have Kevin, Holt's husband.
Raymond, your work life is here.
Kevin starts out the show as a stereotypical intellectual snob. He's dismissive of Jake and the other detectives, and it's clear that Holt is worried that Kevin's colleagues don't respect Holt himself.
Please, come in, take off your shoes.
Neither of us want that.
This underlying strain over fear of embarrassment is a present theme across Kevin and Holt's relationship, though ultimately it's unfounded. Both men are more worried about what the other thinks than is necessary. As the show goes on, he also softens his stance on Jake, especially after being stuck in a safe house with him, which culminates in his rescue of Jake and Holt, where he lets Jake know he actually will miss him. Finally, our first good bad guy, Doug Judy, the Pontiac Bandit. Doug Judy is a liar, a con, a manipulator, and runs a car thief ring. But after repeatedly conning Jake, he begins a drawn-out process of turning to an honest life. He helps Holt and Jake put away his brother George, gets Captain Holt a slick new ride called Sexarella, and gives Jake an awesome karaoke wedding gift. Best bad guy ever.
Because drugs are stupid. Except for weed and sex pills. A man has needs.
At a time, exactly how they like it, are Hitchcock and Scully. The two laziest detectives at the 9-9, Scully and Hitchcock are best friends who spend their time eating, seeing who can sit the longest in their chair, or just not pulling off detective work.
I'm not just poor, son. I'm destitute.
But under that lazy facade, they're good detectives. They crack open the pie mystery and eventually tell Boyle that they chose to be lazy because they did all their hard work decades ago and now want a bit of peace and quiet.
Get ready to meet your new best friend. My ass.
When Jake and Boyle check in on their backstory, that's all confirmed. And on top of that, we find out they've been providing for a witness who was unfairly left out of witness protection. The only downside being she introduced them to wing sluts, and it's all been downhill from there.
What the heck? One wink can't hurt.
Next best, though perhaps the scariest, is Rosa Diaz. Rosa is a no-nonsense detective who's exceptionally good at her work, though her blunt and intimidating nature often put her at odds with her more touchy-feely coworkers. She doesn't like her coworkers knowing about her personal life, which often serves to make her reveals hilarious, like when we found out about her ballerina past.
She's not that scary. She used to do ballet.
As the show progresses, her reveals lose a bit of their comedic luster and often become quite sweet, like when she comes out as bisexual.
I'm dating a woman.
Her difficulty dealing with her bisexuality, as well as her handling her family's antipathy to this development, is a bit of a heartbreaking character arc that really allows Rosa to come into her own. She's deeply upset that her parents don't immediately support her, but their support won't stop her from being who she is. Okay, time for our top 5 best characters. This was a bit of a tough decision, as they're all so kind-hearted. But in 5th, we land on Charles Boyle.
XO, girl, marry him.
Charles is Jake's best friend. He's a kind-hearted, qualified detective at the 9-9, with a penchant for obscure cuisine that his co-workers can't seem to stomach. Charles's character is at the crossroads between extremely caring and extremely oblivious. He's a giver. He loves to go the extra mile for all of his friends. But, as Jake points out at the bachelor party Charles threw for him, what Charles often does for his friends is what Charles would want, not what his friends would want.
All of this, the puzzle, it's what you wanted, not me.
This puts his friends in a bind, as while they want to be appreciative of what Charles has done for them, they often don't like the things he's doing, like bringing in the strange and hoof-infested lunch food. But that's just a small negative in a sea of awesome. Charles is a great guy. He adopts and raises a kid Nicolaj and is always willing to give someone the benefit of the doubt, even if it might come at his own expense. Following Charles is Detective Amy Santiago. Amy is a rule-following, paperwork-loving nerd detective. She, like all the other detectives, is great at her job, but specifically uses her acquired knowledge and police procedure to solve a case. Her defining characteristics, ambition, and a desire to please both help her and hinder her throughout the show. She becomes the youngest woman to pass the sergeant's exam and goes undercover into a women's prison to help take down Figgis.
Oh my god, I need to be a surgeon.
But this same ambition and desire to get on Holt's good side becomes a liability. She often comes across as grating and obsequious. Her character development comes from her learning to be more confident in herself, to know when to assert her nerdiness, and when to take a step back from the situation. Flaws aside, Amy is another great person. She's a Wikipedia editor. She loves Harry Potter, she saves Jake's life, and she's the only person we know who has the hots for the Dewey Decimal System. File that under Noise.
Yeah, this is really working for me.
In a nearly dead heat with Amy, we have Jake. Jake Peralta starts the show as an insecure, disorganized man-child who just happens to have a knack for being a good detective. He's immediately at odds with his new boss, Captain Holt, who will have none of his nonsense.
Oh, don't let me interrupt. You were describing what kind of person I'm going to be.
This grates Jake, but through his confrontations with Holt, he's able to appreciate his boss's wisdom and eventually makes himself a better detective. That's what's so great about Jake. Not only does he grow, but he wants to grow. He often does crack wise and enjoys being childlike, but he understands the value of personal growth and pushes himself to become a better human being. In the process, he's also able to get his boss and fellow co-workers to see the value in his method of tackling cases, and everybody ends up growing in the process. He has self-acknowledged daddy issues stemming from his father abandoning him, and often bluntly says that he wishes Holt were his dad, but he uses this trauma to actually build a powerful relationship with Holt, getting him to become his mentor.
Nice work.
Good. Thanks, Dad.
As the show goes on, Jake puts himself in harm's way, often for the drive to solve a case, but just as often to protect the people he loves.
If you're having dad problems, that's my jam, son.
He helps Holt kick a gambling addiction and saves his life. He goes to jail after being framed for a crime ring he tried to expose, and he and Holt have to go to witness protection after Jake helps protect Pimento from Figgis. He's a diamond in the rough who spends years polishing himself. Title of your sex tape. In second, and it's a very close race to the top, we have Lieutenant Terry Jeffords. There's nothing wrong with Terry. Terry loves yogurt, Terry loves his kids, Terry's a good husband. Terry is the only man we'll let refer to himself in the third person, and Terry also looks like Terry Crews.
Terry can't throw his family away, but these are nice suspenders.
Lieutenant Jeffords is unique in that he's a person of authority who commands respect from his subordinates, but also is organically approachable.
Plus, it's good team building.
The detectives feel comfortable speaking to him about issues, and he often calmly addresses them. He's a gentle giant who is, for the most part, at peace with himself and uses that peace to help others. Granted, he can be a little intense, especially when it comes to dieting. Cantaloupe, yes I can, but this comes from not wanting to go back to his previous obese self. He has discovered who he wants to be and will go to great lengths to maintain it.
You can't tempt me, traitor. Not when I got this big, juicy cantaloupe.
And finally, in first place, it's obviously Cheddar the Corgi. Just look at that cute little thing. Alright, kidding aside, our choice for number 1 is Raymond Holt. Raymond is a stoic captain of the 99th precinct who faced nearly insurmountable odds to become a police captain. He's a black gay man who served as a detective since the 1970s, a time when New York wasn't nearly as accepting as it has become.
Are you kidding? He said, "You'll have to excuse me," instead of "Please excuse me."
He's driven by an innate sense to do what's right, and he always makes time to teach and mentor his detectives. What's great about Holt is, like Jake, he keeps himself open to learning and growth. He allows himself to be humbled, admit when he's wrong, and change his ways to a more effective solution. Of course, like all humans, he certainly has his weaknesses, like a small gambling addiction and an intense rivalry with Wuntch, but he's always able to patch over his differences when the 9-9 is at stake.
You might as well face it. You're addicted to math.
When Jake is unfairly imprisoned, he's faced with a moral quandary: let Jake stay wrongly jailed, or cut a deal with a gangster in exchange for testimony to set Jake free. It's a moral crisis that has no clear answer, and Holt eventually chooses to side with a criminal to help his detective go free. What's amazing about this choice is that it weighs so heavily on Holt. Because this has no clear-cut answer, we get to see him grapple with what he values, and he, and we, realize he values the truth, that Jake is innocent, and he's willing to take an unknown future, offering a future favor to a criminal, over not helping Jake. That's self-sacrifice, knowing he's compromised himself to save a man. He's certainly not alone in putting his life on the line, but as the captain of the entire unit, his decision to put his career and command on the line to save a lower-ranking detective is admirable and never gets topped in the history of the show. Phew! That's our ranking. Disagree? Call 311 and file a complaint in the comment section. Don't forget to binge our full Good to Evil playlist and let us know who you think is most good and evil. And, as always, stay wicked.